The movie begins in a planet that has been completely destroyed by an environmental disaster in 2050. A survivor named Nova explores the desolate area and comes upon a bird skeleton before being called back to base because of low oxygen levels. She tells Simon, an old guy in a wheelchair, back at base that they must go back in time. Nova quickly gets ready to go with her robot partner. After preparing, Nova launches her spacecraft into a wormhole that travels back in time, leaving the dust-filled, orange-tinted Earth behind. As a result, Nova crashes into an unknown, pitch-black wilderness. Night falls in 2025, and a little kid called Naz notices that Nova is unconscious near the accident scene. He immediately asks for help moving her so that she won't be found out. Some police officers saw Naz, Nova, and the robot leave the area despite their quick escape. When Naz moves them to an abandoned factory, Nova seems younger even though she is still unconscious. Detective CLA questions the cops about the collision and the people they saw escaping at the same time. As a result, CLA goes to the nearest house, which is Naz's, and finds him missing. He advises her to examine the former factory. When Naz gets back to the workplace, Nova is already awake. Nova is startled when she sees Claire. As the stolen vehicle leaves with a screaming sound, she spots Nova's abandoned spacesuit. Claire uses Naz's quad bike to go to a military installation when her vehicle breaks down. She provides the military with their crashed spacecraft findings the next day. Given that Nova is only 12 years old in this timeline, the fact that the pilot's fingerprints may be linked to a young child called Nova is perplexing. While driving, Nova asks Naz what he intends to do with the money. He talks about his desire to see his father again in South America. Their automobile suddenly falters and begins to release smoke. Alton, an old motorist, stops and offers to assist them. They meet Marion, his wife, in his house. Marion has supper ready. Nova says once the vehicle is fixed. Marion observes Nova's peculiar attire and Naz's absent driver's license throughout the lunch. Naz is accused of kidnapping in a news broadcast, but the couple decides to help them instead. Naz and Nova see a police car approaching, so they run into the cornfields while Alton conceals the stolen vehicle in his garage. The fugitives manage to get away when the stolen vehicle unexpectedly reverses into the police officer's line of sight. Claire questions the Nova of today at the same time. Claire is perplexed by her parents' insistence that she studied the night before. Upon examining Nova's chamber and seeing nothing unusual, she brings the family in for more interrogation. Claire receives word from a scientist that Nova's fingerprints were discovered aboard the spacecraft, raising the possibility of cloning. The news that Claire's automobile has been found reaches her. CLA heads straight to Alton's house with her squad. When CLA gets there, she asks the couple about the stolen vehicle. A cop soon reveals Alton's deception by presenting Naz's clothing. This sets off a comprehensive hunt for the fugitives. Future Nova and Naz, meanwhile, have arrived in the jungle. As soon as Nova notices a soldier, she automatically points her futuristic weapon at him, greatly slowing him down. The runaways eventually reach a strongly secured home. They slip in via vent so as not to be discovered. They hear a discussion going on inside about plans for drilling near the North Pole. Naz is told by Nova to remain still as she addresses the meeting participants. Among them, she spots a younger Simon, and she asks to speak with him alone. Nova cautions them against digging the North Pole because of the possibility of releasing significant volumes of methane when Simon demands that she make her message known to the public. But Simon's father, an elderly guy, ignores her advice since he thinks there isn't much of a danger. Security then escorts Nova and Naz outside. Nova sees Simon receiving criticism from his father for allowing kids to disrupt their gathering. Meanwhile, Claire is still taken aback by the soldier's sluggishness. Afterwards, she receives a call from a security guard at the estate alerting her of Runaway's presence. Future Nova and Naz are traveling toward the sea at the same time. At this moment, Nova tells Naz that she is a 37-year-old time traveler from the future who has rejuvenated herself. Claire watches the CCTV video of the two escapees back at the estate. When she discovers that something has been placed under Simon's vehicle, she calls the scientist right away to find out whether the current Nova is still being held captive. This is confirmed by the scientist, who also says that little Simon is being protected by two Novas. A SWAT squad is sent by Claire to the billionaire's residence. The two fugitives eventually make it to Simon's house. After retrieving future Nova, Naz and future Nova sneak inside the home and discover Simon in the living room, where he is meditating. Instructing Ad to broadcast a holographic message from Simon's future self, Nova reveals their future acquaintance. Surrounding the home subtly, the SWAT squad watches the footage with little Simon. Simon sees the message, but he's still not convinced. He thinks it's a ruse to demand money. Nas takes hold of Nova's pistol and points it at Simon just as he's about to call the cops. This causes CLA to enter the house after the SWAT squad. CLA detects gunfire. She promptly assesses Nova's health after discovering her on the ground. It seems that Ad deflected a bullet intended at Nova, which caused the robot to explode. Nas finds the Nova event terrifying. He makes a quick, stealthy getaway and arrives to Alton's house, where he tells the elderly man that Nova has been apprehended by the authorities. Feeling a great deal of shame, Nas starts crying. As soon as Alton notices his grief, he gives him comfort. Not long later, CLA is by future Nova's side as she wakes in a medical room. Then Claire asks Nova if there's anything that she can do to help. Nova confides in Claire about her intention to stop Simon's evil scheme in the future. This prompts Claire, who runs to the base to ask the scientist whether time travel is theoretically feasible, and he responds that it is. The scientist is repairing Ad when all of a sudden, Ad comes to life and runs off with a futuristic gun. CLA and the scientist do their best, but they are unable to capture the robot. Then CLA spots young Simon on the property. She tells him that Nova's assertion that she is from the future is supported by the data they have gathered. Simon's father steps in before he can respond, which makes Simon write off Nova's worries as a result of his fixation with climate change. Nas runs to it as soon as he realizes Ad is outdoors. The robot weakens to the point of collapse, having used up all of its energy. Ad alerts Nas to Nova's urgent need for assistance when she is inside an army installation. The robot terminates itself, once again after sending its last message. With determination, Nas takes the futuristic rifle Ad was holding and goes directly to the location where Nova is being kept. In order to help, Alton drives him to the checkpoint, where Nas is detained and questioned right away. The colonel attempts to talk to Nas about his goals in the interrogation chamber, but Nas swiftly pulls a revolver and slows down the colonel and another soldier. The scientist is now adjusting Nova's spacesuit when he rushes up to her. Without hurting the scientist, Nas steals the spacesuit. He locates Nova and assists her in donning the spacesuit. After hoisting her, Nas attempts to make his getaway. At the army base, Nas has already driven Nova to her spacecraft. Before stepping outside the spacecraft, Nova thanks Nas within the craft for saving her life. Reluctantly, Nas bids her leave. He stands outside and watches the spacecraft lift into the night sky. When CLA sees him, he reprimands him for what he did, but Nas doesn't say anything, keeping his eyes on the spacecraft that is taking off. The spacecraft returns to the future, but the planet remains desolate as Nova's mission was failed. When her spacecraft is found, Nova is quickly taken to a tiny container to rest. The little girl Nova transforms back into her adult form after taking a nap. She exits the tent to speak with Simon in the future. Aged now, Simon apologizes and announces a transformation. She is confused when a youngster arrives out of nowhere and calls Nova his mommy. Then future Nas comes forward to claim paternity for the kid. The kid then notices a similar bird skeleton as Nova leads her across the dangerous wilderness. Because of the child's interest in birds, Nova comes to see how critical it is to change the timeline so that future generations may benefit. She accepts to go back in time for another trip, her resolve restored. But Nova wants to go back to the precise place she left Nas and the others. She also intends to speak with young Simon more directly. As a result, Nova goes back to where Nas and CLA are. Despite her brief absence, she inquires whether they have missed her. Nas and Nova headed for the North Pole together. When they arrive in the North Pole, they change into their all-white attire and make their way to the location where Simon and his father are giving a speech to a group of people. Simon worries that Nova's influence will make the plan less likely to succeed during the speech, but his father is determined to drill to the North Pole. They see that the crowd has dispersed as the two kids have used their firearms to slow down the guards. Simon's father persists in trying to start the drilling machine in spite of Nova's advice not to carry out the terrible plan. Fortunately, Nova moves quickly to slow down the drill by blasting both the stubborn old guy and its mechanism. Overwhelmed, Simon collapses and apologizes profusely for not believing Nova. When Nova and Nas see his change of heart, they leave. Later, after dropping Nas off at Alton's home, Nova gives Nas a hug and a handshake. Nova answers Nas's question about if they'll get together again in the future with a vague maybe. Then Alton reappears with an unexpected gift. Ad has been fixed. At last, Nova boards her spacecraft and heads back to the future, having made amends with the couple. Nas walks easily inside the house's spare room and notices the detective's vehicle pulling up. Claire then asks Enzi whether the spacecraft that are popping up all over the place are all from the future. Enzi affirms that they are and that they plan to return if necessary. He also tells her that Nova has come back to her timeline forever. CLA releases Nas and returns his quad bike satisfied with his answers. Naz notices a vehicle with the current Nova in the back seat as he climbs the bike, and he knows they will soon cross paths again, and thus the story comes to a close with a happy Naz trailing Nova's vehicle.